Hello, everyone, and welcome to the B2B Marketing webinar in association with the Think Tank. My name is Kavita Singh. I'm Head of Growth Solutions Content at B2B Marketing. And today we are going to be breaking down the Commercial Marketer Go-to-Market Playbook, which will be packed with insights from our exciting panel. We at B2B Marketing believe that the key to succeeding in today's competitive marketing climate is to become the commercial marketer. And in today's session, we will be having a more solution-oriented and tactical discussion off the back of some research we conducted with the think tank, Unlocking B2B Growth 2025 Go-to-Market Strategies that Drive Revenue, which actually should be attached on Bright Talk if you want to check it out. It's just on the right-hand side of your screen in the attachments button. Before we get started, it's also worth noting that we're going to be hosting a live Q&A at the end of today's session. So please get in your questions and we'll be sure to get to them at the end. And please don't be shy. The chances are if you have a question, someone else does too. Now that we've kind of set the foundation, let's introduce our panel. We are joined by Sarah Whipp, the CMO at Elliptic, Matt Allen, Senior Executive Director, Clients, Market, and Strategy over at Bidwells. And finally, we're joined by Liam Bateman, the founder and Managing Director over at the Think Tank. Welcome all. How are you doing today?
Great, thank you.
Yeah, very good, thanks.
Yeah, really great to have you guys on. I guess before we jump into the topic, can you introduce yourselves and tell me a little bit about your role? And Liam, why don't we kick off with you?
Yeah, sure. I'm Liam Bateman. I'm Managing Director at Think Tank. For those who don't know, Think Tank, we're a full-service B2B agency, been around for 32 years, and we have clients across a variety of different sectors, both in the UK and operating internationally as well for clients around the world. So this has been, GTM has been a big piece of content for us over the past 12 months. We did a webinar earlier on in the year with B2B, looking at what GTM is, then the report that Kavita has just mentioned, which was a really insightful piece, looking at both the UK and US markets and understanding a bit of GTM and how people are implementing it and also the impacts upon business. So this is this webinar is fantastic. Really looking forward to getting into it because I think it's the extension of what else we've done over the years. So really looking forward to it.
Yeah, really well said. And Sarah, how about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Sarah Whipp, CMO at Elliptic. We're a digital asset crypto analytics business focusing on compliance and investigations to make sure that all the payments and the money in the investments go really smoothly and are all safe money. My background is CMO, also head of sales roles. At Elliptic, it's a full gamut from doing the thought leadership, including subject matter expertise, brand building, demand gen, advocation, customer, etc., etc. So really excited to be here. Really critical topic. I think it's one certainly on my lips, and I'm really looking forward to the questions from people because I think that's going to be how we learn and get to challenge ourselves a little bit more.
Awesome. Yeah, really great to have you. And last, but obviously not least, Matt.
Hi, everyone. So Matt Allen, I'm a Senior Exec Director at Bidwells. Bidwells is a 200-year-old professional services property consultancy. Operates primarily UK and does a lot of things in the Oxford-Cambridge region. I also am the Executive Director of something called the Oxford-Cambridge Supercluster Board, which I will probably touch on a bit later on. So I look after our client experience teams, our business development, pitching, bid winning, comms, digital and marketing teams. For the business, and I've been in sort of professional services marketing for about 20 years now, and I guess really looking forward to the conversation today.
Yeah, really great to have all your different perspectives. I think it'll be really interesting as we run through some of the questions. To kind of kick things off, Liam, I know you mentioned the report and the webinar. If someone hasn't checked out our report or a previous webinar that we've done, can you explain why enacting go-to-market is a core business strategy? And also, I guess it's linked to commercial success as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It gets right to the heart of what we've been looking at over the past 12 months. A GTM strategy isn't just sort of another marketing plan in essence. It's the kind of growth engine of the business, and that's what you need to think of it as. It's kind of a master plan that gets all the customer facing in departments within a business, the marketing, the sales, the product, the customer success, working together to create that kind of long-term value. Think of it as kind of like a connective tissue that runs through the business and turns what you know about your customers into revenue. And that's what you're trying to do with the go-to-market strategy. And the research, which was quite surprising, found that fewer than half of marketers truly understood go-to-market, what it encompasses. And that lack of understanding, of course, is costing businesses opportunities. And we're seeing persistent friction, which came across in the report as well, between sales and marketing teams, affecting about 80% of businesses. And that's not just a coordination problem. It's really it's a revenue problem, because if that coordination isn't there and those interactions aren't there, then it's impacting revenue. And that difference between the success and failure is whether those teams are doing things in their own silos or executing together with that unified focus. And when you get it right, it has a big impact. We see it everything from pipeline velocity to win rates, customer retention, a whole range of different things that it impacts. And it quite often, it's not just a small improvement, it can be quite transformational. So it's a very important element in terms of the business strategy of an organization rather than just marketing.
Yeah, really well said. Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think, from the research, we were able to see that when sort of set right and it's done right, understanding the foundation, there does seem to be a ripple effect, for the best or for the worst. So yeah, really good stuff. I guess that leads me to my first question, now that we've sort of established its importance. And maybe we could touch on more some of the tactical tips. Sales and marketing alignment obviously is a huge challenge today, and it continues to be a challenge. How do you ensure that marketing and sales are aligned, I guess specifically around shared revenue goals, since we're talking about commercial success, rather than vanity metrics? And Sarah, why don't we kick off with you for that one?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that. And I think it is the critical point that it's starting off as a philosophical point of view. If I talk about my own head of sales, I remember even when I was interviewing with the job, we talked philosophically. Are we the kind of people that care about attribution to marketing versus sales? No, we're not. Great, we've got alignment there. Do we really believe that this should be a true partnership and working together? And I asked him about, okay, what's your best marketing experience? What has it been like? He was the same about me. And I made sure even when I was interviewing for the job that this was somebody that philosophically I could be aligned with. And it's really grown from there. So we're just entering our planning for 2026, and we are planning together with the head of product, sitting in a room going, okay, what are the business goals? Then from a go-to-market perspective, what do we need to do to be able to hit them? How do we think of it by geography? How do we think of it by product line? How do we think of it from a customer size perspective? Where do we think we're going to get the growth from for new or for upsell? So we talk through all the different dimensions together to get that midline plan. I guess you've got the top line from the business. We produced a go-to-market middle line, and then we are going back to our groups to do our bottoms-up planning from there, but only when we've got that second level of alignment agreed within the business. And I've got to say, for us, having the CPO in there as well is super important, and it's a new muscle for me. And we've also got finance in the room that we're working with together. So it's really a team sport. And I think it starts with having principles, and as I say, being fully aligned to the company strategy.
Yeah, 100%. Liam, do you agree largely with what Sarah's saying? I can see you nodding.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from a philosophy point of view, it's so important. And I think one of the key things is actually getting everybody speaking the same language. So focusing on so that everybody's thinking about the same elements. So for example, like, if marketing's obsessed with MQLs, then when sales care about closed deals, everything's going to fail because everyone's talking about different things. So the only real language that matters is about meeting those business objectives that's set. So everything leading up to those. So if you can define and agree the objectives and performance indicators that's going to feed into that between all of those teams, then that's going to help you deliver that go-to-market strategy much more effectively. And then you can use your metrics that everybody can look at, dashboards, etc., that people can view and across all teams. And then when you sort of start to bring things like intent into the mix and having that as an additional element of feeding that information and insight into those interactions with customers, you start to get that information feeding through. And if it's feeding through to all the teams and they all have access, they're all talking the same language, then that's much more powerful.
Yeah, definitely. And Matt, do you have any other, things to sort of add on to that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because we're from very different sectors, but I think actually it's a very similar approach to sort of how we would do things in the sort of professional services world. So, in terms of when I think about go-to-market strategy, I don't think it's something that sits in marketing or BD. I actually think it's, how we're doing that as a business. So, we are, in my team, trying to align it as much as possible with the direction of travel of the group and the business strategy, where we're actually trying to go and how can we be most successful and what's the best way of translating that strategy into action and going on that journey. So, which markets and which clients matter most, where we're going to play in those kind of markets. How can we be more successful and win, and what do we need to do differently to succeed there? But in a business that's professional services, we don't have these product teams and those kind of things. Ultimately, our fee earners and the sales team are the product themselves. So actually, that interface in terms of how we work incredibly closely with them is really important. And I think actually in terms of measuring success, it aligns in a similar way to Sarah was describing. It's not like, we're trying to claim that, it's all due to marketing. We're not trying to prove ourselves in that way. I think it's actually looking at the business outcomes. And actually, we can then start thinking about it in a more cohesive way, because there's always elements of things that we're doing, and some of them are measurable and some of them aren't that measurable. And if you focus too much just on the measurable, then you're missing out on some of the wider opportunities. We've got 450 fee earners in our business. There's about 150 operational people across the firm. And if I go to the fee earners and start talking to them in marketing terms about MQLs and all this kind of stuff, it just doesn't land. They don't get it. So actually, I need to talk a language that resonates with them. So it's about pipeline and conversion. It's much more about our clients and our markets, and very, very specifically about our clients, because we're not operating in mass markets. We're quite focused. So it's always about progress on those shared goals, and I guess getting away from having to focus on metrics just to sort of prove that we deserve to be here as a team and we're having an impact. Because I think, if you're doing that, then you're perhaps not going down the right path in terms of how you're integrating across your firm.
Yeah, that's interesting. And, as you said, you guys kind of come from two different sectors, but at the same time, I think it's interesting because no matter what your org chart looks like, it sounds like you still need to take sort of a business approach and strategy to kind of align on the same goals there. So yeah, really great stuff.
I was going to say, Kavita, there's one other thing that we've seen from external looking with clients is where a client has put in place a go-to-market champion within the business that kind of sits at the intersection of all those departments and helps coordinate between those departments and making sure there's kind of a seamless execution between. That can really help, but they sit at that point where they need to understand the sort of key high-level strategic objectives of the business, whilst also understanding the digital infrastructure, the marketing activities, what the sales team are up to, all of those different elements, and bringing them together. But if you have that person that can have that oversight and help to change the language or make sure the language is correct across all teams, it can be really good.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's really great. Just moving on, when building sort of the go-to-market playbook, how do you decide which channels deserve more investment at different stages of growth? And that could be paid, organic, partnerships, events, et cetera, really. So Matt, why don't we start with you for that one?
Yeah, I mean, it's not the best answer, but I think it probably depends. So it depends on, who you're trying to reach and what you're actually selling. So, thinking about our business, we're not chasing, like I mentioned before, not chasing sort of, mass markets, and actually our market's quite defined. So if I think about an example of the science and technology sector, when we're doing, large scale transactions and around science parks, there's probably only really about, sort of 50 organizations who are active in our market, who are coming globally, the kind of people who are going to invest £1 billion in a science park. There's not a lot of those. So we've got a small number of high value clients. And I guess touching on Liam's point slightly, that what's been very commonplace in my markets has been that sort of key account management role. And I guess we're sort of blending key account management in terms of what we're doing at Bidwell's with a sort of more an account-based marketing approach, because that seems to be the thing that actually works really well when we're being really focused on a small number of organisations and individuals that we probably know already. So our approach is quite different, and when we're thinking about that, we don't necessarily need to do things like much search engine optimization or pay-per-click, because that's not really where our clients are engaging. So again, it's kind of going, well, how do I actually get to my clients, the people I want to do business with, and is it through which channel is the one that's really going to land, rather than thinking you have to do everything. You might scale back your spend in certain areas to put it into other areas. I'll give you an example. One of the things that I mentioned at the start is that I'm exec director of something called the Oxford-Cambridge Supercluster Board. Now that's a business group, so effectively it's a membership organisation. Now it's actually a company, registered at Companies House, that came out of a marketing campaign. All that enables us to do is put probably 30 or 40 of our biggest, most important clients together with big global science technology businesses, the likes of AstraZeneca or Red Bull Racing, but also about 10 or 12 universities, so Oxford University, Cambridge University. It's all C-suite people across this group. We've got about 60 organisations and about five different sort of working groups as part of that. So I put quite a lot of my energy into that. But actually, it's not really a marketing channel. But actually, what it's doing is creating an ongoing conversation with the clients we want to target. It's creating dialogue. We're not just talking to them about, can you give us that next instruction? How's that project going? Can you get us involved? A lot of the stuff we do is quite long term. So we really need to find ways to have ongoing conversations in a really interesting way with our clients. And so that activity and that organisation I've ended up setting up, which wasn't planned, it just kind of evolved out of a marketing campaign, is something that really lands for us and gives us that ongoing dialogue, but also puts our clients into conversations that they can't get from anyone else in our sector. And it's the people they want to be listening to. They're ultimately the organisations that define what those businesses should be doing. So if you're an investor into science and innovation parks, you pretty much want to know how quickly AstraZeneca and other people are going to expand in the UK and what's coming out of the universities. So we've focused on a channel which is a little bit different to perhaps what you'd see as a traditional marketing channel. So again, going back to my point, it's kind of, you need to work out your best way of getting to market and use whichever channel you need to use to have that impact, not just going, okay, this is what I was taught on my CIM and this is what I think in marketing channels, that's what I've read in B2B. Go for what actually has an impact in your markets and your clients.
Yeah, I find, with most of the questions I'll be asking, there is sort of a it depends answer, but that's really well said. Sarah, did you have anything that you wanted to add on to that?
Well, apart from saying Matt's 100% right, of course, and bravo, what a community he's built. So I'm a little bit green with envy in terms of that. But maybe if I think about coming at it from the software side, particularly having worked from some of the world's largest software companies and started brands, I think I always try and start from the point of going, where in what I'm trying to market is this within the minds of the prospective customers? Is it an unknown need? Is it an unmet need? Is it an underserved need? Or actually are we in a really competitive situation? Because that's where is their headspace at? Because depending on where that is, that's going to define the channel that you need to start with, right? Is it an educating channel? Because no one's going searching for something that they don't know that there's an answer to, or potentially that they've got a problem for. Or is it something that they know there's a problem, they just want the quick solution, in which case it's more of a transactional approach. So I think in addition to what Matt quite rightly said, it was in terms of just looking for what's working and what's getting the ROI. If you're at the planning stage, is think where you are in the minds of the consumer you're trying to get to, and what's the stage that you need to take them through in their thought process. And that will give you a starting point for the channels that you might want to start looking at. And then you start putting the measures in to make sure that you're using those channels to best effect.
Yeah, definitely. And Liam, did you have anything that you wanted to add on to that?
Yeah, I think it completely aligns with what Sarah's saying there, in terms of how we go about when we're starting to work up go-to-market strategies for clients. It's about starting at the commercial goals first and working backwards. So we start at that point, look at what the commercial goals are before we look at channels. So we're not jumping into tactics. It's not about platforms. It's not about anything like that. It's about, okay, what are the commercial objectives here? What are we trying to achieve? And then it's about feeding down from that. How are we going to meet those objectives? And part of that, yes, is the market, it's the customers, it's the audience, it's the messaging, it's all those things that filter down from it. But really sitting at that top level. So that's kind of like sort of revenue-led planning as such. So you're starting with a revenue level, a target you're looking at, and then working backwards from that. And everything you're kind of doing within that is laddering up to that revenue. So if it doesn't, it can be just noise. There's elements that support that, but anything that supports that activity should still be sitting on that ladder that's driving back up to that objective that you're trying to hit. So I think that the other side of this is that we've all been taught marketing funnels and everything else, and I think that the world's changed from where it was, and that buyer journey isn't linear anymore, and people are coming into it at lots of different stages. So when we talk about channels and we talk about the funnel and you talk about which channels of impact, which area of the funnel, you've got to think of it much more holistically, because at the end of the day, your customers are now engaging at different points in that traditional funnel. They're coming in at different points. So you have to communicate all the aspects that you're trying to get across, from educating them, their knowledge, whether they're going to convert, the case studies, the proof points, all those sorts of things. They're going to come in and eat and consume those at different points. So you have to have that engagement ecosystem that allows them to engage with what they want to engage with, when they want to engage with it, and help them to be self-serve in their decision making as they go through that engagement.
Yeah, definitely. I think, as you said, the climate has changed so much, and now the funnel just isn't as linear. And as the market adapts, we have to as well. So it just makes sense. I guess to kind of touch on another topic that sort of rose up from the research, there is sort of this brand versus demand debate that I think a lot of marketing leaders are sort of balancing. How should marketers balance brand building activities with sort of short-term demand generation efforts? And Sarah, do you mind if we start with you for that one?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to know how to sort of phrase this in the right way in terms of being really pragmatic. Let me start at it from when I'm working with the VC perspective. Historically, really the last 2 years, it's all been about demand-based CMOs, right? If you want to be a CMO, you've got to understand growth. You've got to be a demand-based. You have to have been done performance marketing. And I think, maybe controversially, that's been to the detriment of a lot of business growth, because you've had people that are focused on in-year funnel and desperately just trying to hit the metrics that we've all said for the beginning of this is the most important thing you do, hit the business metrics. And that is absolutely true, because if you don't, you won't be in business very long. And I don't just mean you as a marketing leader, I mean the business. Of course, you've got to hit the in-year. But if at the same time you are not preparing for something bigger, if you're not growing something and making next year easier and the year after that easier, I mean, we're on a 60-70% growth year over year at the moment. I know I'm going to have to do it next year. If I'm not already plotting for that, next year is going to be super hard. The year after that's going to be even harder. So I don't think it can be a versus. It has to be an and it's a balancing act. The thing that I'm really pleased about is I am seeing that change now in the conversations people are having when, headhunters are ringing me and looking for CMOs. It's no longer must be solely focused on performance. They're recognizing that longer term need for marketing to be building that reputation, to be able to be enacting the longer term plan as well. And I think there's nothing but good for that, because it's been a really awful couple of years of focusing on short term. And I don't think it's done marketing's reputation any good whatsoever, maybe controversially. We'll see what the experts say.
Matt, did you want to build off of Sarah's answer?
Yeah, I think, I think she's spot on there. When you think about things, I think, we touched on where at the start in terms of the metrics we look at, and, things with the kind of, the growth in digital marketing over the sort of last 10, 15, probably 15 years now, in a really meaningful way. We have probably, shifted too much in that direction, I think. And it's kind of like, oh, we can prove this, therefore we must do that. And ultimately then they're kind of going, okay, we've done something good over here. But as Sarah says, your business isn't going in that direction, or it's not really supporting growth, then what's the point in doing it? So yeah, I'm definitely noticing that shift, and I'm seeing it, across professional services as well as I'm seeing it across other B2B companies. Is that a focus on brand, and that's really important for us because when I was talking before, I was kind of explaining the kind of clients we're working with. So with lots of long-term relationships, lots of quite defined and tight niche markets we're in with some fairly big players within them. And actually, so, for us, it's all about building that deep credibility in our core sectors, being really sort of, creating sort of distinctive thinking that sort of shapes conversations with our clients, and being able to maintain that ongoing dialogue. And when you're looking for something that's quite sort of short term and, buy now type approach, that doesn't really land as well. I mean, yes, we do that in some places, and we do have some of those kind of opportunities in some of our markets. But overall, I think our balance probably leans more towards brand than it does to sort of demand gen, and that really does pay benefits for us. We really do sort of value our position. How we're seen as experts in our core markets, and that brand positioning really does take us a long way, and ultimately does lead to business. So it's not as direct, but then I think when you're in professional services, it's very difficult to be direct. You're not selling a widget where someone can click on and go, yeah, I want 10 of those. What's the cost? Yeah, I'll have that. Someone's coming to us with a very complex property issue. We've got to then have multiple conversations with them over a period of time, sometimes weeks, months, or years, to get to the point where we understand what kind of advice they need. Are they ready for it? Can they afford it? Is it the direction of travel they want to go in as their organisation? So it's a very, very complex buying cycle. So that brand piece for us is really, really important.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense in a sector like professional services. That sort of brand positioning is so essential, especially as you said, the buying journey can be extremely long. So I could totally understand that. Liam, how about you? Do you have anything that you wanted to add on to that?
Yeah. I mean, I agree with both of those sentiments, and I think we always look at it as two sides of the same coin: the brand and performance. They're interdependent. The strong brand fuels performance. It's really important. And Sarah mentioned, if you just focus on that short-term performance without supporting the brand and ensuring that growth is there, you're going to hit a wall, because you can only go so far with that. There's only so many posts you can put out, ads you can put out, and email, whatever else it is that you're doing. You need that brand element to build the awareness, the trust, the appreciation of the business as you go forward. But also, we find that increasingly, and we work with large and small brands, but quite often when we're doing just some of the performance marketing, we need to warm up our audiences. We need to use the brand initially to just explain who the business is before we just hit them with performance marketing activity, because there's that understanding that's required by the audience of who they're being asked to engage with. So quite often that warming up of the brand, first of all, the warming up of the audience, I should say, first of all, with brand activity, helps then to make that performance activity a success. So that's sort of a tactic to really think about when you are. Just don't drive in to try to sell something and trying to get that performance marketing going through. Think about maybe getting the brand across first of all, and trying to get that little bit of awareness with that audience first of all, so they understand who they're going to be engaging with.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to your point, Sarah. It does have to be sort of not versus, but an and kind of approach to demand and brand. So yeah, definitely agree with that. I guess to touch on sort of an experimentation kind of piece, how do you approach experimentation in new channels while still being sort of ROI disciplined? Especially, the market is changing so rapidly with technology and sort of the competitive nature. So Matt, why don't we start with you for that?
Great, yeah. So I guess, I've always encouraged my team to try and be early adopters. So, with AI and things like that, we pushed into that quite early. We won the first B2B marketing award for best use of AI when that category first came out. And Ben in my team has been, on the circuit talking about what we've been doing there and how we've created a whole load of efficiencies in a load of processes across the team, which has enabled us actually to focus much more on the creativity, thinking about our client, being much more purposeful about particular individuals, particular companies, particular markets in a way that we didn't have capacity to do before. So those kind of things have really helped. I think for marketing, and going back to the point I was alluding to before, there is that danger we fall into the sort of cult of the new and perhaps overweight budgets, but into things that are kind of, oh, this is a new shiny toy you've got to play with in marketing and a great new channel. Let's go and have a go at that. Or, the classic one, which I've had pushed at me quite a few times, where you sort of, bump into the CEO in the lift or something. And, I was reading an article about AI, or reading an article about social media. We should be doing much more in this space. And you kind of then, why don't we do, what's our strategy? And you sort of then kind of feel like, do you feel like you're getting pushed into something? You're going, is it really going to have the impact we want? And does it really deliver on our kind of company goals? So, again, when I'm looking at any new channel, it's 100% starting with our client. Who are they? Where are they? What do they consume? Can we actually engage with them in a meaningful way? There's tons of people who I'm engaging with, very, very top level clients. They're not even on LinkedIn. So if they're the main decision maker, I don't need to be on LinkedIn to engage with them. Yes, for other people, but not for some of our key clients. And so I think it's about how much you can allocate to that. And if you're going into try a new channel and test it out, don't kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I think it's don't if you've got something that's working, don't stop it because you're going to try something new. So it's getting that balance right. And I think also it's not necessarily the new things. I think sometimes challenge ourselves to think backwards and going, oh, we've really shifted a lot of our budget towards digital channels and these kind of things. Okay, well, what are we doing in the more traditional marketing channels? And they were successful for many, many years. Why are we still not, doing things that are sort of more physical and face-to-face and using, advertising or whatever you think might get the cut through? And sometimes those things are more impactful now because other people are putting their budgets in different directions. So it's about that share of voice. Where can you have an impact where perhaps others are kind of underestimating the value of that particular channel? So I think if you're getting ROI, it's not about getting it on every single channel. It's about, again, being effective in the channels that really count for your business. So that's kind of how I look at it and how we kind of try and shape things as our team.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a really good point. I think it goes back to what we were saying around, when sort of coming up with the strategy plan, you need to take sort of a business approach and not necessarily look at it as something tactical. And I think AI is great, but it could kind of lead down that road of like, oh, well, everyone's doing this with AI. Look how amazing this looks, without actually thinking about, the actual core problem or challenges that you're facing and being a little bit more solution oriented. So yeah, definitely a great point. Liam, did you want to add anything onto Matt's point?
Yeah, I completely agree around that, not throwing the traditional methods out the door. We've had some amazing results from interactive DM pieces in recent months for a variety of clients in lots of different sectors, for lots of different reasons as well. But I think from an experimentation point of view, I think it's absolutely essential to be agile and to think about how you're going to experiment new channels and bring that into the mix. But I also think the attribution that you can get from some of these things now are becoming a bit of an issue, and trying to understand what's happening in the marketplace is a challenge. And there's three areas that I want to bring into this. And I think one is content. AI is pulling on people's content and summarizing people's content, and it's going outside of your website. So your impact, that content you're delivering is not necessarily, you're not seeing the results from it anymore because people aren't visiting your website. So your traffic is decreasing on your website because no one's reading it. But then on the vice versa of that, the AI is visiting the website. So you've got a false positive on your website. So what do you believe? Is it a human? Is it not a human? And there's still a lot of challenges around how those analytics are being measured at the moment. And so when you think about looking at the traffic on your website, is it right? Is it wrong? It's very difficult to know. Likewise with with SEO. There's a lot of discussions around SEO becoming obsolete, but in reality, AI is operating as much of it as a human as it wants to be, and it tries to be this human. So what it's doing generally is looking at search results. So if you use something like Gemini, and it's going to look at Google search, and it's going to go through the pages on search to find that information, it's only going to really look at 1 or 2 pages, because that's how deep it goes. You can tell it to go a lot deeper, but generally that's what you get. So in reality, coming up in those top 2 pages is still very important, because the AI is going to find you. If you're not there, you don't get found. And thirdly, is something that's a real challenge at the moment is attribution around email. Emails are being opened and summarized by AI, by Gemini, Copilot. They're coming into people's inboxes. They look at it, it looks at it, it marks it as an open. So you see an open, but actually it's the AI doing it as well, similarly to the AI looking at your content. And that's exaggerating those open, and it's also clicking through to check content, making sure it's there, what's there. So the stats may not be wrong, but they may be exaggerated. It doesn't mean that email marketing is wrong and it's not working. It just means that these stats that historically we've used to measure become a little bit more unreliable. And it's a real challenge to understand what's going on with some of these things.
I mean, I think the sort of SEO example is a great one, because traditional SEO still works, but a lot of marketing leaders are sort of looking at it as sort of an isolated thing from AI, and sort of like, being able to rank on ChatGPT or being able to show up on ChatGPT, that kind of a thing. And when in actuality, like you said, it's tied back to the traditional sort of search results that you get from Google. So really great point. Sarah, is there anything that you wanted to add?
I guess I'll keep it short, because there's been some amazing gold there. I've always tried to work with sort of a 70-20-10 rule. If you can get away with this, 70% being able to deliver the in-year company goals that people want, 20% to be focused on next year and building for the long term. And if you can get to this holy grail, having that 10% where you can experiment and trial and test and try new things in pursuit of company goals. One, I think from a marketing perspective, it keeps your marketers alive and working on different projects. It keeps people learning, and that's fantastic. But also, you might just get that one gem that actually develops into its own company, where you've got C-suite leaders. I'm sure that's not exactly what happened, Matt, but right, being able to have this piece where you can suddenly get something you never thought was going to happen from a marketing campaign, but becomes incredibly powerful. So yeah, my advice or guidance would be try and get to that 70-20-10. If you can, you're in a really sweet spot, both for your team, but also for your company.
Yeah, I think it leaves a really good, it leaves room for opportunity in the future, especially with how quickly the landscape is changing. I think that's just a nice approach to kind of go about things. Just moving on to another challenge, attribution. I think we mentioned it earlier. It's another huge challenge. One thing that I think we could maybe touch on is, how do you attribute pipeline and revenue accurately across multiple channels? And Sarah, why don't we start with you for that?
Well, we prepped this, and I know what I said in the prep. I just said if I had a CEO that was asking me to report on attribution, I would run for the hills. It is it's a godforsaken experiment that keeps going and going. And whoever started off by saying that you have to measure marketing like you measure sales, it's put an awful rod for B2B marketers back. You will never get the perfect attribution. So, well, actually, if anyone here's got it, then please, to the question, ring me, let me know. We have great systems that directionally tell me the 7 or 8 things that people do, but that's it, it's directional. And marketing is not an exact science. We know that there will always be different X factors that come in. So I think you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Try and look at the attribution models and make the best decisions. Keep them consistent so you can see the patterns. But genuinely, as we talked about in the prep, if you have a CEO or a board that's asking you to report back on that, I would be sprinting in the opposite direction, because I've just never seen one that's 100% that works. And that's where you start getting into difficulties, I think, for positioning marketing. But others may know better.
How about you, Matt? Do you agree with Sarah? What do you think around attribution?
Yeah, I mean, professional services. I mean, if you want to get something that's messy, I mean, trying to get attribution in a professional services structure where you've kind of got clients that are kind of engaging through relationships, disappearing out of kind of, I guess, marketing engagement, coming back in, different stages, as we've kind of talked about earlier on. So, it's not something that's really easy to track, and you always feel a bit sort of fraudulent sometimes, I think, in terms of, if you be pure attribution in terms of, okay, that's it was that one thing that ultimately resulted in that bit of fee income. So we look at things much more at campaign level in terms of activity and what's happening, so like across whole campaign, and that's really something that goes just in our team. So we're not really feeding that back up to anyone apart from ourselves, and going, okay, is the stuff we're doing working? How does it compare to the previous campaigns we've done on whichever channel we're looking at? And then I think it's, then very much it's focused on that sort of market level impact, going back to what I was saying before about how we're aligning with the business strategy. So again, when I'm speaking to sort of SLT, it's going back to the business metrics about, pipeline growth, how we can look at market share and some of the wider things. And there's a whole load of things that feed into that, clearly. And it's not just, any of our campaigns. There's loads of other things that fall into it. I think the thing for us as well is, and it kind of touches on that point of, if you're maybe getting it wrong if you're just focusing too much on marketing metrics, and if that's what you're being judged on, maybe are you in the right organisation? For us, it's that close collaboration with fee earners. So ultimately, many of those are, there are experts, there are salespeople, some of them are equity partners, so they're owners of the business. So ultimately, our shareholders who we're working with day in, day out. And if I'm pretty confident we're getting our marketing right in most of our areas. I think you get that from them as well. So they get a sense. You can't pull the wool over their eyes and go, I know you don't think it's working and you're not really getting much opportunity in that sector, but look at these marketing stats, they're through the roof. It's like, that's not going to wash. So you have to have something where you can't really measure it as well. And this bit is actually going, look, we're doing this. We've got some metrics in the background, but actually, do we feel this is working? Are we getting traction in this sector? Are we growing client relationships? Are we getting more fee income? Is our pipeline improving? We can't always track it back directly to where it starts, but I think if everyone feels like it's going in the right direction, then that's a good place to be. And that's where you get that trust in terms of what you're doing from a marketing, BD, whatever perspective.
Well, I think it's interesting because you said, you measure things by campaign, you communicate that to the team, but it doesn't go sort of above that. I think that's really important, that you actually are looking at those marketing metrics, but maybe keeping it within the team. And then when it comes to the C-suite, you can kind of, steer a little bit more closer to those, core business goals that everyone sort of is aligned on. Liam, is there anything else that you wanted to add?
Yeah, just quickly. I mean, I think from an attribution, I completely agree. Attribution is a nightmare. I think one thing you can do is look across all teams and look at like a balanced scorecard across all teams, which is more about benchmarking and creating direction so that you've got that element to be able to judge how things are going moving forward. One little thing a practical thing that I think is quite interesting to consider at the moment is with attribution and looking at website stats, things like that. We've always had this headache for the last, since GDPR with only seeing those that accepted cookies on websites and being able to understand what's actually going on with interaction with our websites. Well, the UK Data Act that was put in June, came in force in June, is changing that for the UK marketplace. So later this year, you won't need explicit consent for monitoring website analytics. So you will be able to change your banners on your website, the cookie acceptances. You won't need to have people accepting. So instead of getting about 20% of your data in your website, you'll be able to see everything, all those interactions in your website going forward. So there's various other things that the Data Act changes as well, around legitimate interest and things like that. But it's just an interesting dynamic. If you're looking at those base metrics, you will have more visibility later this year. Yeah,
that's really, really, really interesting. Just bearing in mind the time, I just want to run through a few more questions. And then if you haven't gotten your questions in, feel free to drop them in. We still have plenty of time to save those for the end. We touched a little bit on the C-suite as well. What do you think is the best way to report ROI to the C-suite in a way that earns credibility and influence? And I know, Matt, you kind of touched a little bit upon this, but do you want to expand maybe a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep it short. So I think the same principle applies. Speak in their language. They don't want the marketing dashboards. They want to know, are we winning in the right markets that we're targeting? Are we progressing with our key clients? Is marketing help to grow revenue? So it's very simple. It's commercial. It's not, I don't give them reams and reams of dashboards to look at because they just don't understand it, and they ask the wrong questions. So it's always got to be rooted in those outcomes. And focus on what the company strategy is and how we're helping the business to grow. So yeah, that's how I do it.
Yeah, and Sarah, how about you?
Exactly the same.
Yeah.
Right? There is no point calling marketing success on something that a company's failing at. And similarly, if a company is succeeding at something, no one really cares if we think marketing's failing. Marketing care, but it's not going to be something that the C-suite want to focus on because the company is winning, and therefore it's for marketing to solve itself. Just separating those, I think the danger is when you get the marketing teams going, well, we did everything, but the company's failed. You just lose credibility time and time again. So exactly what Matt said, just keep it to the business strategy, keep it to the business goals.
Short and sweet. I love it. I know we talked a little bit about AI as well, hopefully largely in a positive way. I know we were talking about, don't forget about your traditional channels as well. But I guess looking ahead, how can you use AI almost as a growth engine when it comes specifically to a go-to-market strategy? And Sarah, why don't we kick off that question with you?
Yeah, I'll start with a headline. Inbound and outbound is dead, as far as I'm concerned. It's now, philosophically, you've got to think about it as all bound. And that means looking across the entire mix with sales and marketing together, with every single stage, working together to go, what can be moved into more of an agentic mode? So not just AI, but actually agentic processes, agentic work that can be done that will work across the sales and marketing mix to drive growth from an all-bound perspective. I'm really excited about it because I think it's a fundamental change and one that's been way overdue because it's caused so much friction between sales and marketing. And I actually think AI, and agentic AI particularly, is going to be an incredible agent for bringing these functions together, thinking at it from a company revenue engine perspective, and then flipping it and also thinking it from a customer service perspective. And if you start getting within that mindset, that for me is where the gold comes from. And it's fundamentally changing the relationship between sales and marketing and product through a go-to-market engine. So yeah, for me, we are RIP, inbound, outbound, and welcome to the brave new world that is all bound, supported by agentic AI.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. Matt, do you have any thoughts around that or anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, for me, I think, we're using it to really, I guess, accelerate our insight on our clients. So, we've got, I guess we do a huge amounts of advisory work. We bid for a huge amounts of advisory work. Some of those documents are huge, 100-page bid documents. There's amazing IP that we've got in those documents. And then you're kind of going, that thing we said and what's that thing, how do we approach them? So actually, how do we pull that information together? And AI is a great way of doing that, which we're doing already. So it's giving us that sort of sharper client intelligence. We're able to sort of tailor our approaches to market and our conversations in a more meaningful way, capturing the information we have across the business. And it's making us faster and more relevant to them, I think. So, we're using it in that kind of way. So it's very, very direct, very, very focused on our clients. And it's all about that kind of personalization that we really want to get from it.
Yeah, really great. And Liam, how about you?
Yeah, just quickly, really. I think that AI is changing marketers from the element of doing to the element of strategy. I think we are moving towards having to be much better strategists, and I think that's where the human brain comes into this. At the end of the day, creativity is still quite a uniquely human trait, and I think it's something, it's kind of our superpower, and it's what needs to feed into this. I think there's a recent study I was looking at that by Graphite that found that 82% of content cited in ChatGPT is human generated, and only 14% is AI generated. I don't know what the difference is, but generated the rest of it. But anyway, but it's also, which you could look at it and go, okay, well, there's lots more content out there that's human generated anyway. But also they found AI generated content, 10 articles tended to rank lower in Google search. So even the AI prefers human content, in written content. So there's certainly that element of creativity and difference and spark that comes into play, that has to overlay and has to be the element that impacts, that has the impact, and that's what changes you from being just producing good to being great.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. AI is great, but you have to have a strategy behind it. So, yeah, really well said. We've done a lot of work around sort of that balance between the human touch and AI, and obviously that's just never going to be lost, which is hopefully a relief to a lot of people in marketing. To wrap things up, I'd love to direct this question to you, Leah. What do you see coming next in the world of go-to-market strategy? Are there any trends, tools, or shifts that you think will define sort of the next 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, I had a few things I was thinking about, but I think I'll keep it fairly short because I think we're running out of time. But I think one of the key things is the self-serve B2B buyer. I think it's really important that people consider that. Buyers are increasingly wanting that kind of seamless digital self-serve channels to research and even transact in for some businesses. And I think that understanding that what your buyers actually want from you, and that they want to do their research, find the information out in detail before they want to talk to a salesperson. I think that self-serve B2B buyer element is really important for the future. And I think that if you don't create that frictionless environment for your customers, then you're going to lose out to those that do.
Matt, how about you? Did you have anything that you wanted to add on to that?
I think for us, it's going to be that hyper personalization, I guess a much more detailed focus on client experience. That's where we're really trying to go, and that gives us that sort of tailored engagement for each client. We can probably hopefully spot opportunities earlier. We can ultimately deepen relationships. So actually for us, it's we're less in the volume, we're more in precision, and so it's how do we enhance that going forward will be where we're focusing our energy.
Nice. And Sarah, how about you?
I'm not that brave, so I'm going to talk about I think is going to stay the same. Because if you'd have asked me a year ago, we wouldn't be here. I'd completely get it wrong. But what I think, and I hope, and I believe will stay the same, is the need to deliver value at every single stage of the customer and buyer journey, one that differentiates your company and has a consistency of quality that they can rely on to support them in achieving their goals. And if we keep that at the heart, that is what I believe will stay the same.
Great. I mean, it's great I know there's tons of prediction pieces that are probably being created right now, but it's also good to know what's going to stay consistent. That's equally as essential to know. That about wraps up my questions, but we do have a couple questions that we can actually get to before we wrap things up. So I can see Craig Taylor has a question. Every expert is claiming the old B2B go-to-market playbook is dead. So what is the new playbook, and how would you explain it in simple terms to a CEO? So I guess this kind of goes back to sort of speaking the shared language. If anyone has any thoughts around it.
Happy to have a go.
Go for it.
So I think it's just an evolution, isn't it? I think it's not sort of like it's dead. We're still utilizing lots of those channels, and you're still looking at at some of those go-to-market strategies there before. I think it's just it's probably a shift in terms of very much focused on I guess we were talking about before in terms of like selling and very, very specific and directed in terms of and broadening it out, where I would say we need to go into that sort of wider business strategies. How do we win in those markets? How do we in better markets? How do we get that from our perspective? How do we get that personalization at scale? And how do we connect those brand assets, data, marketing activity into something that's really driving growth for the business? So I think that's how I would probably look at it in terms of trying to get a CEO to sort of think about actually how we grow an organization.
Yeah, really well said. Anyone else have any thoughts around it?
I guess from my perspective, it's what do you want your CEO to change as a result of having that conversation?
Mm-hmm.
Is it requiring a change in funding? Is it requiring a change in structure or operating model? and why for your company, right? Maybe it's my preference. Well, it's my preference, right? It's not having sort of a theoretical discussion about, but what matters to your company and why does it need to change, and what will be the effect of doing it? Is it going to drive extra growth or is it going to save cash? If it's one of the two, then that's how I would talk about it with my CEO. This is how we're going to drive more growth, or this is how we're going to save cash. If not, sorry to be blunt, I'm not certain why I'd be having the conversation with the CEO about it in the first place, because that's what my CEO wants to know about. Those conversations. The rest, in terms of the playbook, that's my job. And I'm happy to talk to them about it, but that's what I'm trusted to deliver. What I need to do is translate that into the business conversation and how it's going to hit the business goals more. And that's how I'd approach it.
Great. Well, hopefully we've answered that question.
Yeah,
I think you both sounded great. I guess to just go on to the next one, Ryan Hayden, he said, if you are a regional marketing lead and have been asked for a quarterly 10% MQL increase without budget clarification, what would be your standpoint? It's quite specific, but I don't know if anyone wants to have a stab at it. Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
I've had these conversations around it, an offer to do 1,000% increase. They'd be awful qualified leads, but there you go. So I would start off by sort of sitting back and just going, what's driven that request? Is it that we need to hit new sales numbers? Is it that we have more salespeople and actually we don't have the right sales capacity model right now? What is driving that conversation that got you to this point? Because it feels like you've been given something where someone's translated a business goal into marketing speak to help you, but you're not helped because you have no context about what you're trying to do or why. So I would thank them very much for translating into marketing speak and then say, can we just talk from a business perspective? What is it that we're trying to achieve? Because just real concrete examples, if it is that it's a sales capacity issue, it might be that people are willing to accept lower quality marketing qualified leads because it's earlier in the funnel, because they want to make sure that sales are making it work. And that's a different reason from actually, no, we need to increase our business results by 10%, in which case you might actually be better looking at more in pipe qualifications and working with sales to improve the win rate. So I'd want to understand the business goals with it, because that as a specific thing doesn't give you enough context to actually know what to recommend. But it's very kind of the person who asked to try and translate that into marketing for you.
Yeah, definitely. Anyone else before we?
Yeah,
go ahead.
On that one, I completely agree with Sarah's point, and it's kind of, what it actually is, that business outcome that you're trying to achieve through this. So get to that understanding. When Sarah was going through their kind of questioning, I was thinking about something I've been looking at on my MBA course recently, and that was about sort of it was Japanese performance management, getting down to root cause analysis. And basically, you don't start with the top level thing. You keep on asking questions back. So why? And you go and you ask 4 or 5 times. And you actually then get down, then you can have a sensible conversation about, okay, well, if that's what the real thing is we want to achieve, how do we actually get there? Are we chasing numbers, or are we chasing opportunities that convert? Which markets or clients actually matter, most to us? If we're chasing growth, what are we actually trying to, going to do? And what's the right way to tackle that problem? And I think you need to just change the conversation from, okay, it's all about MQLs, to actually understanding why that's an important thing for the business, and it may not be.
Yeah, definitely. Liam, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, I completely agree with both those sentiments. There's nothing really to add to that one. I think that's answers it.
Fantastic. Well, I do think that's about all the time we have for today. Thanks so much for answering those questions. Thanks so much for sending in those questions as well. Before we go, it's worth noting that through our Propolis community, we're helping marketers become more commercial by giving them access to proven strategies, peer-tested solutions, and tools to link marketing activity directly to business outcomes. And you can learn more by searching Propolis from B2B Marketing on Google. With that being said, I just want to thank you all for sharing your expertise with us today. And to our viewers, again, thanks for your great questions. We hope that you found today's session really helpful. If you'd like to hear more from anyone we spoke with today, feel free to reach out to them on LinkedIn. And as I said, definitely check out the report that we did with the think tank. Liam mentioned quite a few interesting insights that we found, so definitely worth checking out. Also, if you want to listen back to any of today's session, this webinar will be available on demand, so you can watch it at a time that suits you. Thank you so much, everyone, and I will see everyone again soon for another webinar. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.